literally the laundry people in their list as nurses. And that came in, they presented evidence of that at trial, cross-training, where people that are driving buses, well, they're actually cross-trained to be a CNA, or whatever, so that you get to count them. Posting requirements. The law requires nursing homes to post what their nursing hours are. The evidence that we presented at trial was that what they're posting are projected hours, not actual hours. So there are, how do you determine what 3.2 nursing hours is per patient day? When do you determine what the census is? These are all things that we went through for 4 years. After trial, certainly there was a $750 million jury award. But that ultimately was reduced down to a settlement because for a multitude of reasons. One is we wanted them to actually pay, and as opposed to filing bankruptcy. But primarily what we were interested in wasn't the injunction, and a monitoring system in place where their books would be opened. We would have someone monitor them, and they would provide information to our office on their compliance with the law. We defined what a nurse was. We had to define what a nurse was. We defined what census was in the injunction. We had to define how you count census, how you arrive at 3.2 nursing hours per patient day, because quite honestly, everything was at issue as to what is 3.2 nursing hours, who's included. The statute includes a term that is really, it's no longer in use, and I can't remember it right now. We litigated that as well. At the end of the day, I know you wanted to ask questions. I wanted to be brief. We, because of all the problems that have been mentioned with the criminality, we went as a civil case, a 17-200 unfair competition. My logic is, first and foremost, these are business entities engaged in business activities for profit. We want to disincentivize putting profits for their patients by going after them where it counts, and that's their pocketbooks. Under 17-200, when they're neglecting elderly, we're entitled to $2,500 per violation, and then because it's elderly, $2,500 per the elderly. We established over 1 million violations. There's no way that could be it is a systemic problem. I'd be more than happy to provide the Assembly at a different time. More exhibits if they want more information, as well as more input on it. I know we're really rushed for time, and also a bibliography with this as well. It's something that I know is very dear to your hearts. It should be dear to all of our hearts. If it's for our loved ones, that's a reason. If it's for ourselves, that's a reason. But thank you.
That's right. Thank you very, very much for this information, all of you. Let's move to our post representative. We really appreciate Ann Brewer being here, and I hope you will all be able to just stay here just for a few minutes of questions. And I know I have already left a note to the other member of the on-time caucus, Colonel Paul Cook, that I would be late to session today. So if it is the pleasure of my co-chair, my joint chair, to go a little bit beyond, I would be happy to do that. So Ms. Brewer, please proceed.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training Post, I'd like to thank the chairs and the members for providing me this opportunity to be here today and discuss our contributions towards combating elder and dependent adult abuse crimes. POST was established by the legislature in 1959 to set minimum selection and training standards for California law enforcement. Our mission at POST is to continually enhance the professionalism of law enforcement in serving its communities. More than 600 sheriff offices, state agencies, and municipal police departments participate in the POST program, employing over 90,000 peace officers and public safety dispatchers. All POST-certified entities are able to receive the Commission services and benefits such as job-relating training tools, assessment tools, development and implementation of new training courses, reimbursement for training, and quality leadership training programs. What I've asked the Sergeant to provide you with is a list of the training opportunities out there, as well as the latest post DVD that we've created on elder independent adult abuse. I'll just briefly summarize the training that's available for law enforcement. It begins at the academy or the basic training level for both peace officers and public safety dispatchers. Topics covered minimally include related laws, crime elements required for an arrest, types of abuse, mandated reporting, and available resources. Under Penal Code Section 13515, every city police officer or deputy sheriff at the supervisory level or below who is assigned field or investigative duties to attend an elder independent abuse training course within 18 months of that assignment. Subsequent to the academy, Post has certified a number of elder abuse training courses to a variety of law enforcement agencies throughout the state. These courses, which are available for California law enforcement investigators, are a variety of more in-depth and lengthy courses that include training on the dynamics of elder abuse, effective investigative techniques, prosecution, and so on. The Robert Presley Institute of Criminal Investigation is a specialty post program. It was designed as an advanced training program for investigators and includes a series of specific foundation specialty fields. One of these specialties is a 40-hour domestic violence course, and within that course contains a block of training pertaining to elder and late life domestic violence. There are also a series of domestic violence courses that Post has certified that do include training on elder independent adult abuse. The Instructor Development Institute is another post program that at its highest training level, master instructor requires the student instructor to design a 3-day training course. And in this last July, Post approved the most recent elder dependent adult abuse training course, which was developed by a master instructor student from the San Francisco Police Department. An additional training tool developed by Post for law enforcement entities in the California Post program are the high-quality training videos, which are called telecourses, and that's what's included in the folder. These videos are intended to be facilitator-led and are encouraged for use during briefings or in a classroom setting to maximize the training. Each telecourse is 2 hours in length, and it's broken down into short segments throughout the video so it can be stopped, played, facilitator-led, and discussed. Post first produced an elder independent adult abuse training video in August of 2001. This is the newest release and was revised in January of 2011 and emphasizes law enforcement's continued and vital role in safeguarding elderly independent adult victims. The video focuses on the response and investigation of the patrol officer and discusses the different types of abuse in different settings, including at home, convalescent care facilities, and licensed residential care homes. In the video, the officers are presented with real-life scenarios and through facilitated discussions at their own agencies can apply their own departmental policies and procedures as they pertain to interaction with the resources provided in their cities and counties. Topics that are presented in this video include interviewing victims, witnesses, and suspects, reporting, documentation, and resources, physical, sexual, and financial abuse and neglect. The crimes occur within and outside of the residence and within a nursing care facility. The telecourse is available in a DVD format and also includes reference documents and the State of California 341 report forms that are available in PDF version and can be downloaded for use or reference by officers in the field. And those I've printed out and contained in the folder as well. The subject matter experts who contributed to the making of this DVD were representatives from 10 organizations, including various police and sheriff's departments throughout the state, the San Diego County Adult Protective Services, the Los Angeles County Office of the District Attorney, Human Options, Disability Abuse and Personal Rights Project, and the ARC of California. Over 1,600 copies of this elder independent adult abuse video are being distributed this month to every California law enforcement agency in the Post program free of charge. Additional copies are available at any time by a simple online request from any agency. This video is also available for purchase by agencies not within the Post program. So that concludes my overview of the training, and again, thank you for the invitation for me to speak on this very important topic.
Thank you very much. Just, very timely. It's being distributed this month. I see Mr. Amiano is maybe ready to leave us, but we do have one additional important witness who is joining us to present a blueprint for the future. And I do apologize. I was going to try my best to keep us on time. But all of your testimony from what we are currently doing and what we can do better from the prosecutorial and elder justice standpoint is very much appreciated, and I look forward to continuing our work to streamline this operation. Thank you very much. Let's invite now, if I may, our final contributor, and that would be Lisa Narenberg, who is a fellow social worker but also has a master's in public health, and who's been serving as chair of the Elder Justice Work Group, an Archstone-funded activity that actually is just about ready to release its draft report today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you so very, very much for your patience and for listening to all the testimony up to this point. Please proceed.
Thank you, Assemblymember Yamada. As you said, my name is Lisa Narenberg, and I'm here today representing the California Elder Justice Work Group, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to present, to be on the agenda today. The work group was formally launched in October of 2009, although our members had actually been meeting for about a year before that. We were all participants in the Archstone Foundation's Elder Abuse and Neglect Initiative, and as I know you're aware, the Foundation funded 18 projects over a 5-year period, which include training programs, the state's 3 forensic centers, a family justice center, which Paul Greenwood is involved with, financial abuse specialist teams, which you've heard some about, and several others. And I'm sorry I didn't have enough copies for everybody, but I did bring a copy of a recent issue of the Journal of Elder Abuse and Neglect that focuses on the Archstone project. So this goes into much more detail on these projects. In addition to supporting these very innovative programs, the Archstone Foundation, I think, really recognized the power in bringing people together, service providers who work at the ground level, to share their insights and experiences. And so they bring us together a few times a year. It was at one of these meetings that we were divided into small groups, and I participated in a group that began looking at systems problems. And our discussions, to begin with, really drew directly on our work, the work that we were doing in these Archstone projects. Some of us were developing training programs in mandatory reporting, and we were really frustrated by a lot of the issues that you've been hearing about today. In particular, and I want to talk a little bit about how this translates to the ground level. One of the areas that we first started talking about was just the variation around the state and how reports are handled. Project Master, which is one of our projects that trains adult protective service workers, in fact, developed a test to measure whether trainees actually understood their reporting duties. And when they ran it by APS experts to make sure that we had all the right answers correct, that they were in agreement, we discovered astonishing disagreement among the people that were really the first-line responders. So here we had a wonderful opportunity to train workers, but we couldn't agree on how the system worked. I'm pleased that I think you're starting to recognize, as did Assemblymember Yamada, some of the dysfunction of this system and how frustrating it is for those of us who are trying to train in these areas. I do some work at City College with emergency medical technicians, and trying to explain the intricacies of the reporting system is really quite a challenge. We rarely get beyond the pronunciation of the term ombudsman. There were other examples of systems problems, many of which you've heard about today. Some mandated reporters weren't reporting, responders weren't responding. There was also a lot of confusion about cross-reporting, and despite the whistleblower protections that you've heard about earlier, we were hearing situations of mandated reporters actually losing their jobs or being threatened with that at least, and that was certainly true of the emergency medical technicians that I was training at City College in San Francisco. The financial abuse specialist teams, which, as you heard earlier, deal with these complicated forms of financial abuse, weren't clear about what information they could legally share or what was subject to discovery, so that was a barrier for them. We heard from one member of our group, Shauna Reeves, that senior centers, which are a trusted source of information for seniors, were in fact allowing vendors, or in some cases scammers, to make presentations under the guise of being objective financial advisors. And I don't need to tell you how difficult it is to help victims once they've been scammed or lost their homes, and how disturbing it is to discover the service network, our network, is actually facilitating some of this abuse. So once we got started discussing obstacles, it was hard to stop us, and we continued to meet by phone. A lot of the issues come up repeatedly, and not just with our group, but have been really on the table, have been discussed for many, many years. And we decided that a first step in trying to address them in a systematic way was simply to list them. So we started a list. As we talked about solutions, we added a second column. Later, we added a third column for recommendations. That list became a chart, and that really became the foundation for the blueprint, which I'll be talking more about. In 2009, we went back to the foundation with a proposal to bring others into our process, and in October 2009, we received a grant to host a summit, a statewide summit, and develop a state plan. It was then that we actually launched the California Elder Justice Work Group, and it really has been my pleasure to work with the group, whose members are listed on the handouts that I've prepared for you. What I think is really exceptional about the group isn't just the range of expertise, but that our members have deep roots in multiple networks, including Adult Protective Services, the mental health community, the long-term care network, consumer rights, and I think they understand some of the intricacies of these systems and have affiliations that we can be working through. So in essence, we're kind of a voice from the field. We were really delighted, Assemblymember Yamada, that you were able to join us at our summit last April, as was Kathy Greenlee, the Assistant Secretary of Aging. And during that event, we had 92 health and social service providers, legal professionals, educators, and researchers from a very wide range of disciplines who were working together in groups to address some of these issues that we've been talking, that we're able to put a little bit more time into them. Perhaps the most exciting session of the event was where Betty Malks of Protecting Our Elders Project led us in a session where delegates actually made commitments to how we could work together and tackle some of these problems. Following the summit, we continued our work, meeting with professional associations, advocacy groups, the California Department on Aging, and many others. And we also identified some past reports and recommendations that we incorporated into our blueprint that we felt were still relevant. So the final blueprint, which is now in production, weighs in at about 90 pages. You have copies of an executive summary, and it really still is just a beginning. I've heard some excellent suggestions today that I'd love to run home and add, but we really do consider it a working document. And I think when you see the complexity of this problem, trying to lay it out and get a structure, it can be very valuable. And it's our hope that this committee, that foundations, that program developers, schools, anyone with an interest in this area will make use of the blueprint in the way that they see fit. It's gratifying that opportunities are already presenting, certainly this event. Earlier this month, our new Attorney General, through her Smart on Crime committees, had one group that was looking at elder abuse, and several of my colleagues who are here today, including Paul Greenwood, Tristan Zvar, and Mark Zahner, are participating on that committee, where we made some recommendations that are more focused on the criminal justice and civil justice system. In the few minutes I have today, I wanted to just highlight a few areas that we address in the blueprint that I think are of particular relevance to this group, and I think certainly hearing the other testimony confirmed that. We focused a lot on mandatory reporting because, as I said, that really is the first link to the service network. I've already mentioned the lack of consistency, which I think really stems here in California from the fact that we're a very decentralized program. Unlike other states where a state agency really exercises a lot more control and vigilance over HPS programs. The programs in our state really operate relatively autonomously, and many of them do an excellent job. But it's my understanding that in recent years, as a result of cuts, the Department of Social Services has had to relinquish even such basic functions as sending routine updates on policies and procedures. and they're not able to respond to the local programs for guidance on these very, very difficult issues. The Protective Service Operations Committee of the County Welfare Directors has provided some leadership, but PSOC also relies on its member APS programs to participate, and because of local cuts, they're not always able to provide representation at forums like this one today, which I think is very important, and the lack of representation from the Department of Social Services, Adult Protective Services, was also troubling to our group. Other needs related to reporting include the fact that we lack, and this has been mentioned earlier, that we lack a statewide toll-free number to ensure that the cases that are reported get routed to the right community. We also lack standardized assessment tools and effective systems for collecting aggregate information from all these multiple agencies that respond to reports, which could provide crucial information about the scope and nature of the problem, and also if what we're doing is working. We're hearing a lot of statistics being thrown out. It's very difficult because much of the research that's been done has looked at a particular system, the Adult Protective Service system, or financial abuse cases. And so when we make these generalizations, I'm a little nervous about them because we don't really have across-the-board kind of statistics. As you know, under the Older Americans Act, and this has been discussed today, ombudsmen serve as patient advocates. They're the voice of residents. And to effectively perform that role, they have to have the trust of those they serve, and we've heard about that today, which includes confidential relationships. But California also designated ombudsmen as investigators, and there are some that believe that this role of patient advocate and independent investigator are inherently incompatible. Because many residents are either unwilling or unable to give ombudsmen permission to report crimes against them. We know that some crimes in facilities are never reported, investigated, or prosecuted, and that really is unacceptable. Victims in our communities don't call the shots in deciding whether or not crimes are reported. Residents in facilities shouldn't have that burden either. But I think while there's general agreement that crime in facilities shouldn't be tolerated, there isn't really a clear consensus on the solution. I think many in our network support AB 40, the legislation that would require crimes in facilities to be reported to both law enforcement and the ombudsman. Others suggest that we follow the lead of other states where APS investigates, freeing the ombudsman to focus on their advocacy. But let's be clear, there's not an easy fix to this problem, and it isn't a matter of just fixing the language of the law. Whatever the approach we adopt, it's going to require resources. As Mark Zahner and Peggy Osborne, who's here today, would tell you, I'm sure cases of abuse in facilities are very, very complicated to investigate or prosecute. Preparing APS or law enforcement to respond is going to be an enormous task, however this falls out. I think, though, that California is up to the task, and we already have a lot of the basic ingredients. You've heard today about Operation Guardian, which is definitely a national model. Our forensics centers, which you've also been hearing about, are doing groundbreaking work in critical areas like bruising and pressure ulcers. I think one of the problems in prosecuting these cases is having the good forensics evidence that's needed. UCI, which was mentioned earlier today, is doing some very groundbreaking work in looking at bruises, looking at pressure ulcers, and the first step is to define baseline statistics on what you would normally see in an average organization, and then that would help us define where there are strategies. And some of the work has already begun. Following our summit, Joe Rodriguez and LA Ombudsman Molly Davis began meeting with some of the APA leadership, researchers from UCSF and UCI to continue that discussion, and they're working on local protocols and MOUs that can be used to coordinate reporting at the local level. PSOC, the Professional Operations Committee of the County Welfare Directors Association, has a consistency committee that's looking at variations in how APS programs around the state handle cases. Riverside County, it's my understanding, explored a risk assessment tool that's one that's being used in other states. And Project Master at UC San Diego and the Bay Area Academy at San Francisco State are working with state and national APS leaders to develop very comprehensive training programs for APS. But local programs or any single network really isn't going to be able to solve the problem. It's our state that entrusts these groups to carry out these critical functions, and they really need state support and guidance to carry it out professionally and with confidence. We're hopeful that the newly passed Elder Justice Act will also provide opportunities, and President Obama's budget contains money for APS. It's not a lot of money. It's intended to begin building infrastructure, but that's what we in California need, I believe, is the beginning of a really effective infrastructure. We're working closely with our national partners to ensure that California has a voice in national developments and takes advantage of some of the opportunities that the Elder Justice Act provides. A lot of recommendations have been made today about the needs for standardized performance standards for conduct. And other states are dealing with these issues. And I think as one of many states, we should be going to our federal policymakers as well to fund the kinds of technical assistance and research programs that are needed to inform those kinds of services. In the blueprint, we also focus a lot on legal services. And as you've heard today, California's civil and criminal laws are also models that are being replicated in other parts of the country. Despite problems, they're very strong laws, and yet here also improvements are needed. We know, as you've heard today over and over again, the legal response is very inconsistent across the state. Elder abuse, you've heard about today about two particular laws, but elder abuse is addressed in criminal, probate, family, and other civil codes, and cases may be heard in multiple courts. And one of the things that was called for by the legal professionals at the summit was better coordination among these different systems and opportunities for those who work in the system to come together and to discuss common needs. And among those needs are the needs for forensics research and information. It's already been said today, the need for a centralized system for intake. Our state senior legal services hotline, which is another very critical component in this network, has lost its funding and needs to ensure that seniors in need have access to legal services. We lack adequate protections against abuses that are committed using legal devices like powers of attorneys and trusts. And we certainly don't have enough public guardians or legal help, especially for people with limited assets. But here again, California really is endowed with enormous resources, and we're very fortunate to have a lot of very, very talented people in this room and in our communities. Innovators like Judge Julie Conger, who you've heard about today, have led the way in creating elder protection courts to make courts more accessible to older people and to bridge the link between the legal community and the communities. Somebody asked earlier, I believe it was Assemblymember Yamada, about working with Amiano, about working with mental health courts. That's something that's being experimented in with the elder courts, is a better relationship with the behavioral courts and also with communities. And they're also focusing very much on restitution, which we know is so important. The need for law enforcement training was a recurrent theme in our discussions. And to get a closer view of what was needed, Mary Cunahan and Molly Davis, two members of our group, building on some work that had been done in Napa County earlier, conducted a survey of law enforcement officers that yielded feedback from 46 officers around the state. And I've already mentioned the need for training in long-term care facilities. Clearly that is at the top of the list, especially if this legislation goes through. But one of the most pressing needs that law enforcement officers themselves identified was the need to work with financial institutions in order for them to get critical evidence and to prevent losses. Once again, we can offer effective training, but we also need to make sure that we have our laws in place, and there's a lot of confusion about what kinds of information can be shared and what can't. Like many issues in elder abuse, we have state and federal laws that we need to be looking at. So we've been working with Jennifer Duane of the Elder Financial Protection Network, which has been doing a lot of work with financial institutions around financial abuse to look at state and federal laws related to securing evidence and information and also securing assets. So we're very pleased that POST is here today. POST has sponsored many excellent trainings. I'm well aware of the work that they've been doing in the area of domestic violence. In fact, I know Candy Heisler, our colleague, has been working with them. She and I worked on a federal project looking at a very comprehensive curriculum for elder abuse, which I think could possibly be the basis of another curriculum. But clearly we need something that's comprehensive. We also looked at the crying need for services for victims. We just don't have enough services to help people that have already been victimized. And one particular area of need is for services to victims of financial crimes. That includes legal help. It also includes mental health services, because people who have lost their homes, life savings, their independence, the mental health consequences can be really devastating. Also advocacy with creditors. People have gotten themselves in trouble with creditors as a result of being victimized, so they're victimized again. Also advocacy around restitution. We're trying to look at existing resources instead of trying to start from scratch. Terry Rastelli-Dietz and Lynn Benjamin are two members that we've been working very closely with. They've been educating us about resources through the Mental Health Services Act, and conversely have been talking to those networks about the needs of abused elders. And we're doing something similar with victim compensation to make sure that those systems are accessible to the victims that we're dealing with. So here again, another area that I just really wanted to briefly mention, and I know that this is an interest of yours, Assemblymember Yamada, is the issue of keeping dangerous people out of our long-term care workforce. It's something that is very, very important. A lot of people have called for criminal background checks today, and that certainly is a start. But that's not really enough. There was an excellent report I know that you're aware of. You had a hearing about it by the Senate Office of Oversight and Outcomes, and one of the issues that they talked about was that beyond criminal background checks, we need to make sure that once somebody who's in the system who commits abuse is invited to leave the system. One of the very troubling things that we've heard about is that people may be fired from institutions and then end up in the home care system because those systems don't communicate with each other. Here again, local communities have stepped up and looked for solutions. And in Napa County, for example, they developed their own certification process for screening workers. So we have lots of excellent examples. Here again, though, I think state leadership needs to address the problems, and a lot of these things just need to be addressed at the state level. We can bring together the problems, we can bring together innovations, but it really needs to be a partnership. I know we're really stretched for time, and so I'm going to leave off a couple of points that I wanted to make. And just to summarize, that here in California, there's a lot that we have to be proud of. We've produced experts, we've produced model projects and statutes, not just in elder abuse, but in the related fields of nursing home reform, caregiving, and domestic violence. When state leadership has lagged, local innovators have rushed in to fill the vacuum. And I think we've really led the nation in many innovations. And I've prepared a handout for you that talks about some of the additional innovations that we've identified in the state that I think can really be built on. But local innovation isn't enough. I know I'm repeating myself. Some of these problems really need to be addressed at the state level, and we believe that bringing together local innovators with state leadership will create a very powerful force for change, and would welcome the opportunity to work with you to explore some of these avenues. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Nierenberg. We really appreciate this sort of a snapshot into all of the work that has gone into this blueprint, and look forward to the issuance of the final report. I want to, I know I'm late to session. I don't know what that means. I've never been late to session. So should I turn to the staff and ask if we invite public comment, or let me ask this question. How many of you who have been patiently waiting to give a brief public statement would like to do so? Okay, just one or two or three. Well, please, let's put that mic up here, or you can either sit and give the comment or stand, either way. I will certainly not want to close down the opportunity to public comment. And frankly, I don't collect per diem, and I don't take the car, so I don't think, and I'm in the building. Am I still on camera? I think they cut the cameras off, so I am officially in the building. So good afternoon now, and gentlemen, please identify yourselves.
Madam Chair and
Yes.
remaining members,
Yes, I think it's just me.
there's a saying that the mind can only absorb what the seat endures, so I will be very brief. I wear two hats. My name is Jim Levy. I'm from Orange County. One of those hats is I'm a member of the California Senior Legislature, and the other is I am an ombudsman in Orange County. The one hat I wear is very rewarding. I've been a member of the California Senior Legislature for 10 years or more. We've been able to see needs in the community. We've been able to get authors for those proposals put in the bill forms. And it's very rewarding to see some of these proposals which have been actually enacted into law. The other job I've been doing for about 2 years, and that's an ombudsman. And I have to say it's the most frustrating job I've ever had in my life. Because I go into these facilities, I see things, people talk to me, they tell me things, some horrible things, frankly, and I cannot get them to give me permission to reveal these things. So I have to keep all these things bottled up inside of me. And it's really frustrating. Every now and then, I've been able to convince someone to allow me to sign the piece of paper I can put through a report. And a couple of these times that I have done this, it's come back to bite me, because these people have then told me repercussions that they got because it was very obvious that where the report came from, and they've been penalized for it. So there's got to be some way to resolve this problem with the ombudsman reporting system, and I don't know how to do it. If there is any way that anyone can think of, we who are ombudsmen would sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments.
Assemblyperson Yamada and colleagues, Robert particularly, thank you very much for convening this important hearing. My name is Benson Nadell, and I've been the coordinator of the San Francisco Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program since 1986, and I've seen a lot of legislation to protect the most vulnerable parts of our population passed, including dependent adults. There's still a lot that needs to be said about dependent adults, because that opened the jurisdiction for a long-term care ombudsman program to residents who were not envisioned in the Older American Act. And we need to look at that, because the dependent adults, they need advocacy, they need to have their day in court, and they need to have civil remedies. And I'm particularly thinking of residents of adult residential facilities and other facilities that are not in the ombudsman definition of long-term care facility. But I want to say a series of bullets, and I don't mean this to be bullet in the negative sense. Number one, neither the surveyors in Department of Public Health or in community care licensing, LPAs, are mandated reporters. I think they should be, so that ombudsmen can advocate for the inaction, and this is Older American Act language, of other government agencies. And if we don't know sometimes what they're working on, we should at least be able to contact the residents and see whether or not that resolution by that licensing agency is satisfying to them. We are advocates in a social justice context, and that is one of our main duties. The other thing I'd like to say is that in this hearing, we did not really hear from any local ombudsman programs. My colleagues, we get together, we're sitting on incredible cases, stories. We're like the Homeric version of the ombudsman program. And while Joe is great in presenting the format of the Older American Act, we're sitting on this mandate for the last 22 years at least. All sorts of stories and struggles, local collaborations, and I think that one of these days we need to be heard as local programs. And I thank you for convening this session. I can't see us not being in the loop. We would like resources to do the state mandate. We don't know whether licensing agencies can ever be advocates the way we are, nor can we necessarily guarantee that law enforcement can be advocates. I myself have sat on interviews with elder victims of crime where law enforcement was doing the videotaping, and this is before Crawford, and the ombudsman was there to kind of reassure the resident during that process of talking to members of the local law enforcement agency. We are integral to this process, and we need to be recognized. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next. Hi.
Hi, I'm Joan Parks, Manager of Ombudsman Services of Northern California. We're a 13-county local ombudsman program. Thank you so much for having this hearing. We just appreciate, as a local program manager, that this is, again, coming to the surface, this tremendous issue, and it's horrendous out there. A couple things I wanted to address in response to some of the things that were said today is, first of all, our program alone in the last 6 months has received 607 reports of suspected elder abuse. That's a lot of reports for us to be out there investigating. We need to have criminal investigations. We need to have regulatory enforcement. We cannot do it by ourselves, and we actually have very different roles from both of those agencies because we are advocates. I would very much like to see AB 40 come into existence. We need to have that. In our local program, I see us being able to use that when the mandated reporters report to ombudsman and law enforcement. On the most egregious cases, we had one come in this morning of a resident claiming rape, and this is how I would have to send it over to the Department of Justice, redacted. None of the important information is on there. Is who was the victim? Who is the possible perpetrator? It's all redacted. And so I'm asking law enforcement and the Department of Justice to go figure. So if we have the and, I could call them and say, by the way, did you see the 341 that came in this morning? We need you to cross-report that to DOJ, to licensing, to whomever, because I can't do it without the residents' permission. It may take us a week, or as this gentleman said, we may never get permission from that resident to do this. But federal laws and state laws preclude me from moving forward with regulatory and criminal activity intervention. The other thing I wanted to mention is Assemblymember Amiano mentioned, he said, well, how do these people get these drugs? In that one particular case that we had, they get the drugs from the caregivers. We have many caregivers that when you open their medication cabinet, they're all mixed up from one resident to the other. This particular caregiver had drugs from several residents all mixed together, including from residents who had moved away or who were now deceased. And so that's how that resident got them. It wasn't that a lot of doctors were involved. That happens too, where they go to more than one doctor. But a lot of times our caregivers are keeping medications rather than destroying them. And I would like him to get that information as to where that came from.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I believe our final commenter, perhaps,
Actually,
or final two.
my name is Tippi Irwin. I'm the Director of Ombudsman Services in San Mateo County. Joan has just addressed what I actually came to the podium to address, but would like to add to it. Very often, you ask the question, where do they get these psychotropic drugs from? In small board and cares, it's not unusual for a caregiver to call a doctor and say, Mrs. Jones's behaviors are escalating, can you increase the dosage? And the doctor will increase the dosage without ever seeing the client. And that's very disturbing. So it's another part that I just wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me comment today.
Absolutely.
My name is Douglas Samea Reed. I'm here representing my wife, Jody Samea Reed, who died July 21st, 2009, while in hospice. Hospice has been allowed to operate in this country for 40 years, over 30 years in the state of California, yet can do pretty much anything they please. What I want to do is put a face before you of someone who loved his wife, still loves his wife, stood by her as she was brutalized, extorted, and the hospice even tried to remand custody of her remains over to themselves when she died in the hospital. You need to see this. You need to hear this. This is the conditions of participation, the California Standards of Quality Hospice Care put out by CHAPCA, the California Hospice and Palliative Care Association, and Title 22, Division 5, Home Health Services, of which hospice is not a home health service. All of these things are defined by hospice. Hospice is the only business that I can find that gets to choose their own rules and set their own guidelines. They are not audited, surveyed as they call it, once but every 8 years. And even in that time, only one patient is reviewed out of up to 100. So 1 out of 800 patients once every 8 years. If the hospice sees up to 500 patients, it's 2 out of 4,000. But if you look at this book, I don't know if you can see from here, but you can see a lot of blank pages. This side is California's laws. This column, is what the state of California, California Department of Public Health, enforces with hospice in the state of California. It's blank, nothing. My wife died. I love her dearly, but she died saying to me, please do everything that you possibly can to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to somebody else. Is this what we of the state of California want to do with our elders or our adults, our loved ones, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever? My wife was 42 when she died. And she asked me to do this. I will spend the rest of my life doing this, and that's why I came before you today, to give you that face and to pose that question to you. Is this what we want for our citizens of California, that we can just let these people do whatever they feel like they can do? And I would need 3 hours to go through what was done. But I have been working tirelessly for 1.5 years now with organizations all the way up to, what is her name, Kathleen Sebelius, Department of Health and Human Services Secretary, the Washington, D.C. Office of CMS in San Francisco, California Department of Public Health here, the Office of the Inspector General, the Office of Civil Rights. They put a contract in front of her, my quadriplegic, cancer-ridden wife that was 7 days away from dying. They put a contract in front of her that said that she cannot refuse anything that they ask of her without the advantage of contacting her attending physician, without anybody's oversight whatsoever, in violation of the Patient Self-Determination Act of 1991 and countless other things, plus extortion. They had removed all comfort care from her. They refused to flush her chemo port. They refused to give us a copy of the plan of care. They refused everything. They refused to include the attending physician in any discussions of her care. And then they had the audacity to write in the medical records. Later on I found out, because I didn't know that I could get them, but I found out that they created a story that I was abusing my wife and trying to isolate her. If I was doing a terrible job, because her parents were there, her grandparents were there, her aunt flew in from Hawaii, her brother and his wife were there, neighbors were there, friends were there, so much so that my wife said, it's too much, I can't do this. But she died asking me to do that for her. And nobody should have to go through that. And this is happening more and more and more. And we do nothing.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for that unanticipated but certainly very riveting story. What I'd like to do now is just close very quickly by thanking again everyone who participated today and all the staff, the sergeants, everyone that helped put this very lengthy hearing together. I would just end on this note that the age span from 18 to 100, approximately, if that is the goal for us to live to in our state today, is a long time. And there are many different touch points and different systems involved in this care for those who are aging and dependent. So let's work together to make the system better. And I thank you very much. This hearing is now adjourned.